just want to correct a bit of the billing that went out about me. Not that Chris just put out, but there's one or two of the sort of partner websites that mistakenly said Mike Chitty is an entrepreneur and a blogger. I'm certainly a blogger. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm one of those people that Michael Gerber said, you know, an artisan who had an entrepreneurial seizure. About 15 years ago, decided I was fed up of working for other people and making dollar for them. Wouldn't it be great if I set up my own business and became my own boss and set up, you know, my own money-making stream? And that's what I did, but I'm not an entrepreneur. You know, I'm one of those people that existed as an entrepreneur for a few minutes. And then once I had the business, I went back to just doing the job. So I've not built my business, I've not grown my business. I'm not the kind of person that really creates lots of GDP in the region. But I'm not bothered about that because I don't think that GDP in the region is primarily what enterprise is about. And for me, an enterprising person is someone who is pretty clear about the current reality. They understand their point A. They understand what's going on in their life. They know what they like about it. They know what they hate about it. But the important thing is they know they want to change it and make it better. They have an idea about a notional point B, a place that they believe they can get to where life is just a little bit better, a little bit more rewarding, a little bit more enjoyable. They have what we in enterprise theory like to call a vision. They very rarely call it a vision. They call it an idea of how things could be better. So if someone has an understanding of where A is for them, their current reality, and they have an understanding where B could be for them, and they have some cunning plans and strategies and are taking action to narrow the gap, then in my book, that person is an enterprising person. Entrepreneurship, on the other hand, and I think the way we conflate enterprise and entrepreneurship is a real problem for making progress in the UK at the moment. Entrepreneurship for me is the process of setting up an organisation, setting up some sort of structure for the purpose of mutually beneficial exchange. We're going to produce something that we can exchange in return for something else. That's entrepreneurship, be it social or otherwise. In my own sad little world in Leeds. I want to run through a couple of principles that I think are really important that we violate quite often, or I see being violated quite often. If we want to work with this notion of enterprise that says we start with A, we help people establish what B is, and we help them close the gap, we absolutely have to start with where that person in front of us is at. Not where we want them to be, not with some outcome that is on our monitoring returns form for which we get money drawn down, but we have to start absolutely with where they are at. Now, I do a lot of work, as I suppose many of you do, in super output areas, because that's where the money's thrown at for enterprise. Well, it's also thrown at universities, but it's the kind of super output areas that I'm mainly working in. And let me tell you, if I start where my clients are at, it's not really at the point where they're thinking of starting their own dream business, where they have a fantastic business idea, they just need a bit of help to operationalise. And 3 half-day workshops and 6 hours of an enterprise coach will get them there and put them in their dream life. They're not really in that game. They might tell you they are, because they quite like the lunches on the workshops, they quite like the attention that they get, and they quite like the chance that there might, at the end of it, be some free or some cheap money. So they might tell you that that's their game, but not really. When you sit down with them and look into their eyes and you really find out where they're at, they're worried about how they put breakfast on the table in the morning. They're worried about how they get rehoused. They're worried about how they provide better opportunities for their kids than the opportunities they had. They're the things that they're really, really worried about. And if we want to help them become more enterprising, we have to help them absolutely understand their A's, absolutely understand their B's, rather than ours, and we have to help them close the gap. Because that's the way that we teach them to be more enterprising. That's the way that we help them to become more active agents in their own lives, rather than continuing the game of being manipulated, steered and influenced by policymakers and planners who are trying to actually get compliance into an economic strategy. So I think if we want to be serious about developing an enterprise culture and engage all people out there in making progress from A's to B's, we need to be absolutely clear that this is about starting where you, the individual, are at, and not with any preconceived notions we have about how many bricklayers, plasterers or biotechnologists we may need in the year 2015. This is the enterprising approach to enterprise, rather than a kind of a planned economy approach to enterprise, which is really quite paradoxical to how enterprise cultures emerge. Our work must be person-centred, absolutely centred on the individuals in front of us and the communities in front of us, and it must be responsive to their needs. Best example, of how we get this wrong. We were working in Liverpool a couple of years back, working with 3 communities in Liverpool, talking to people about their aspirations, their goals, their drives, their A's and their B's. There was an awful lot of artisanship in Liverpool, jewellery making, woodworking, still a lot of poetry, a lot of creative writing, a lot of music being made. Their A was to get better at that, and their B was to have somewhere to perform or to sell. Okay, can we do up the town hall? Can we do up a space where we can actually come and perform, where we can sell, where we can trade our wares? A responsive authority would have heard that and said, yeah, how can we facilitate that? Liverpool City Council and their partners had recently had Michael Porter as part of his big DTI tour, and he'd said, the future for Liverpool is biotechnology, high-tech, creative, digital. We need the creative classes, not people that want to write poems and make jewellery. We need a different breed of person. And I don't know how many tens of millions they spent along the Edge Lane Road there putting in biotechnology centres that local people don't see, don't use, and don't see as a part of their lives. But it was a heck of a lot. I'm not saying we don't need the strategy. I'm not saying we don't need the big infrastructure. But for every pound we spend on doing that stuff, we ought to also be spending pounds on listening to the real people in real communities with the real cultures, values and histories and saying, how do we help you become the person you want to be? So I think this balance of investment needs to really be thought through between the big physical infrastructure projects and the responsive, community-focused facilitation projects. I think that ability to both link the strategic sort of top-down processes of planning and thinking and infrastructure development and service development, and linking that in a sensible way with the ability to respond to our communities and the individuals in them in a way that listens to them and honours them and acknowledges them and provides them with the support that they need and removes the barriers that are in their way to make progress, is going to be a real key challenge, both for the community development professionals in the room and for the people that work in the RDAs and the local authorities and the planners. This ability to get not just economic development, but community development, working both strategically and responsively in ways that are balanced. Big, big challenge for all of us. Separating out enterprise from entrepreneurship, I think, is vital for us. We stretch both words way too far, way too far. Entrepreneur can cover anyone like, an Egypt like me that went self-employed 15 years ago and has never grown the business, through to the sort of Duncan Bannatynes, the Anita Roddocks, it's a word that we stretch way too far. Enterprise certainly is a relevant and useful set of capabilities and skills to everybody in the community. This ability to set goals, to have dreams, to narrow the gap between where you are and where you want to be, absolutely vital to all. Entrepreneurship, relevant to a few. It's not surprising to me that schools don't absolutely snap up all the resources we throw at enterprise education and focus it directly into the sort of business support type stuff that schools normally think is about enterprise. Because let's face it, enterprise and entrepreneurship, as it's sort of widely understood, is at best kind of politically ambivalent if you're a teacher. Not many teachers go into teaching in order to turn out perfect, economically productive units. They go into teaching to facilitate education. And if their belief that what the enterprise agenda are about is about turning out widgets for employers, they're bound to resist it a little bit, aren't they? I would have done. So perhaps we need to present enterprise differently. And again, some of the concepts I use, enterprising people are clear on they have two real qualities about them. One is they're very clear on their self-interest, by which I mean they know where they are and they know where they want to be. They're very clear on their self-interest. But also they have the power to pursue their self-interest. They have the skills that they need. They can organise people and money in ways that they need to narrow the gap. If I start talking to educators about enterprise as being the process of helping people clarify their self-interest, clarify where they want to get to, and then help them build their power to get there, suddenly educators start seeing the relevance of their subjects to helping turn out more enterprising young people.